What's going on, guys? Welcome to the video. As most of you will know by now, Diane Abbott appeared on the Andrew Marr show yesterday to perform one of her trademark car crash interviews. This time, the subject was Brexit and immigration, so you know it was going to be gold. The Sun and Daily Express have articles on this interview, so we will briefly check them out and go over some of the highlights from the Andrew Marr interview, because the whole interview itself is like 11 minutes long, with more than half of it being repetitive dribble from the Labour MP. Now, the interview itself starts on Brexit, so we will just check out what the Express article says about it before going over the clips relating to that article, and then we will move on to her ridiculous comments about immigration. The Express article headlines, Diane Abbott suffers car crash interview as Marr mocks Labour's bizarre Brexit strategy. Andrew Marr ridiculed Diane Abbott after the Labour MP attacked the SNP and Liberal Democrats for dictating their demands to the EU. BBC's Andrew Marr repeatedly pressed Diane Abbott on whether Labour would back the Liberal Democrats' plan for a pre-Christmas election. In an awkward interview, the Shadow Home Secretary insisted that Labour's position on Brexit was simply to wait on the EU. Miss Abbott confirmed that the party would look at it, but raised concerns about the UK dictating demands to the EU, which we all know now the EU have given the delay that the Remoaners wanted. The bill, which is also backed by the SNP, is set to be introduced to the Commons on Tuesday. Under the plan, the Fixed Term Parliaments Act would be amended to state that the next election would take place on the 9th of December. However, the election date is dependent on the EU granting the UK a 3-month Brexit extension, pushing the deadline date to the 31st of January 2020, which, as I said, they have already, with a flex extension that could be either November, December or January. Miss Abbott told Marr that the one-page bill appeared to be problematic. Now, rather than continuing to read over what she's got to say there, we will actually check out some of the highlights from this interview herself and, of course, touch on the immigration subject. So let's check it out.
So, to be absolutely clear, because the expectation now after the publication of this bill is that the EU will grant an extension until the end of January the 31st. If that happens, and this bill is down on the floor of the House of Commons, there is no reason for Labour not to vote for it. You know, you avoid what you consider crashing out without a deal, because there's a delay until the end of January, and you get the election that you say you want. What's the problem?
There's a big if in that. We need to know what sort of extension the EU is going to give. I mean, it would be a disaster for British industry and the country if we came out of the EU without a deal. For instance, look at security. We've got those awful events in Essex with those 39 migrants who died in the back of a lorry. If we crash out without a deal, we'd have no access to the European arrest warrant, we'd have no access to Europol, we'd have no access to all sorts of important databases. We cannot crash out of the EU without a deal, and Labour will do anything in its power to stop that.
Now, I've cut out the first bits of the interview, as I said I was going to, because it's nonsense. But in a show of complete stupidity, Diane Abbott claims without a Brexit deal, things like the recent migrant deaths in a refrigerated lorry in Essex are going to be more common and harder to deal with. Clearly forgetting all of the people in this lorry are Chinese and not going to be part of any European database. Brexit had nothing to do with the Essex situation, Diane. I'm sorry, there's no way you can swing it. All she is doing here is using this migrant situation and the excuse that she's put with it to give Labour a way out of a general election like the complete cowards they are.
Because to a lot of people watching, it seems that the Labour Party keeps saying we want an election and then finds a reason not to actually vote for an election. Let me remind you of what your leader said. Jeremy Corbyn said before the so-called Ben Act, for the extension. This is what he told the House of Commons.
I repeat what I said last night. Let this bill pass and gain royal assent, then we will back an election so we do not crash out with a no-deal exit from the European Union.
The bill has passed, it has got royal assent, and yet you're not calling for an election.
As I said to you, we can't take the risk of having an election and then, because Parliament isn't sitting in the period of that election, we crash out on the 31st.
What's up, Diane? Is it hard to think of some new bullshit to excuse the Corbynated chicken's lies in Parliament, claiming the lily-livered Labour Party would back an election after the Surrender Act passed? I love how Andrew Marr made her sit there muttering and stuttering before once again she blamed the boogeyman known as a no-deal Brexit. What a surprise that is. A no-deal Brexit has got this shitweasel laying cable whenever she thinks about it.
You've always said that you wanted safe and legal routes for legitimate migrants coming into the UK. Do you distinguish in that between people who are fleeing from war or famine or being persecuted because of their sexuality or religion on the one hand, and people who simply want a better life, who are coming from poorer countries, who want to do better in these countries? Do you discriminate between those groups?
It's not for us to discriminate between those groups.
So you don't?
know. Well, you know why we had the Windrush scandal? You know why all of those elderly West Indians went through a horrible time, some of them being refused medical treatment, some of them dying before their case could be resolved? It's this type of debate around migration. We have to look at what is fair, we have to look at what is right, we do have to look at improving safe and legal routes. But the longer the media and some politicians talk about migration in this way, the more at risk we are of another Windrush scandal. If you look at the EU 3 million in this country, that's a Windrush scandal waiting to happen.
So when asked by Andrew Marr if she would distinguish between a refugee who needs help and an economic migrant who wants to help himself, she tries to claim it's similar to the Windrush scandal, which is complete bollocks. These economic migrants are coming here in 2019, not the 1950s or 60s. The level of identification and record keeping is far better now than it was then. And from what I know of the Windrush scandal, the issue was around proving their right to be here because they came in a time when admin procedures at government level was piss poor in comparison to now. We are talking about illegal immigrants here versus Windrush generation who was invited to the United Kingdom. You might want to invite the world, Diane Abbott, but the rest of the country don't, including the Windrush generation you attempted to put in the same category as illegal immigrants. Talk about being disrespectful. Nothing he asked has anything to do with the Windrush scandal. Windrush was a government fuck-up when it come to paperwork, not because they had a policy that only allowed refugees in. Windrush had nothing to do with the current Labour Party's wish to open the borders to anyone and everyone so they can increase their membership and votes at a general election. So do not try and make out like the Windrush generation is the same as illegal immigrants today or government policy around immigration. That's just stupid. It was a government fuck-up.
And when we talk about a safe and legal route, people being able to come in so they're not stuffed inside the back of refrigerated lorries, how does that actually happen? How do you make that happen? Do you, for instance, move the border from Calais to Dover so people can be processed and investigated here?
I think what you have to do is lose the assumption that immigrants are a threat and migrants are always a problem. You have to get the information from people who are seeking to come here. It's a different type of process, it's a different type of attitude, but it's making it easier for people to come where they may have a legal claim to come because they've got family here. It's about safe and legal routes, and it's not about having...
If it's making it easy...
Well, in that clip you see it. She has no plan whatsoever. She would just open the doors and say, come on in, take what you want. You heard it's a different process and a different attitude that makes it easier for people to come here, because that is always going to end well, dumbass. How the hell is this woman an MP with this level of stupidity? Although actually thinking about it, it seems to be quite common among MPs. It seems if you're not stupid, you don't get the job.
If it's making it easier for people to come, some people will look at, for instance, the ONS figures this week, talking about the population of the UK going up by more than 3 million by 2028. That's 3 Birminghams growing up in this country. And the pressure that will put on public services. Do you worry about this country simply becoming literally overcrowded, or do you think that's ridiculous?
This is exactly the type of debate which led to the Windrush scandal. You are more likely to be helped by a nurse or a doctor from a migrant background than be behind them in the queue. Let's look at what this country's needs are. Let's look at how we can have a more efficient immigration system. Yes. But above all... but just let me finish. Let's look at how we can have an immigration system which reflects these people's which reflects this country's values.
Now, I do love how when Andrew Marr brings up figures from the ONS, who she has quoted herself before in one of her many attacks against Brexit, she completely dismisses it and gets angry because he's not meant to challenge her with actual facts and figures. She can't process numbers very well, remember guys. 3 million hurt her brain, so she had to throw a little hissy fit. He only asked if she is worried that the country could become overcrowded. He didn't say we should send every migrant home, and yet she flew off the handle anyway. How dare this old white man question me and claim migrants would overcrowd the country, I imagine she was thinking. She is right about the doctors and nurses being migrants and serving us. But the thing is, those doctors and nurses don't come here via any freedom of movement that the EU provides. They apply for visas using the correct channels and are approved based on their merits, which is the correct way to do it. Not what you want, which is just to let them all in. You see all these good doctors we get from other countries, if we go down the Labour route, they stop coming because if you do that, the job market becomes flooded, you absolute idiot. She did give it away at the end there though. She wants to do what reflects the immigrants' values. Fuck what the British voter wants, they are an afterthought to this spunk trumpet. But I'm going to end the video there, guys. I've had enough of listening to her, and Diane Abbott has humiliated herself enough for one video, I think. But if you've not seen the whole interview, I suggest you go and watch it, just for the shit and giggle of it. Before I go, I do want to thank the channel's PayPal, Patreon and Subscribe Star members for supporting the channel, along with everyone who watches my videos. Remember to let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Leave a like, subscribe with the notification bell and share this video as it helps the channel a lot. And I will see you all in the next one.
There is a pattern consistent throughout history of oppressed people turning on the oppressors. Slaves against their owners, the peasantry against the feudal barons, colonies, Mr. Verhofstadt, against their empires. And that is why Britain is leaving. And it doesn't matter which language you use, we are going and we are glad to be going. We're off.
This Parliament is a dead Parliament. It should no longer sit. It has no moral right to sit on these green benches. They don't like the truth. Twice they have been asked to let the electorate decide upon whether they should continue to sit in their seats while they block 17.4 million people's votes. This Parliament is a disgrace. But they're too cowardly to give it a go. But the time is coming. The time is coming, Mr. Speaker, when even these turkeys won't be able to prevent Christmas.